I think why I chose entrepreneurs as the initial subject was because they're the modern day gladiators. They're the people that are doing the things that many wish they could do and don't have the courage to. They're putting themselves in these sometimes precarious and risky situations by leaving a 9-to-5, leaving stability and trying to strike out on their own and trying to create something that maybe hasn't been done before, at least not in that way.
Boom, we're live. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode. But this episode, I'm pretty excited. We're going to be talking about, I haven't even told you the title of this, Sam.
I'm excited.
But I want to keep it kind of centered around like creative production tips for podcasts and creative ways to grow your podcast. Because you work with you have your own podcast agency and you work with some creative podcasts. So I think there's a lot you can shed light on. And if you guys don't know Sam, he's the host of Finding Fathers. Finding Founders.
Dude, that's a common one we get mixed up with. Finding Founders.
Okay. I mean, Finding Fathers, that could be an interesting one too.
About the history of America. That's a good one too. That's our spin-off show.
Yeah, everyone who's adopted, just trying to find their fathers, right?
Or what's that show where it's like, you are not the father?
That's one. Maury or Jerry Springer. Yeah. But he also runs a creative podcast agency. Like I said, works with a lot of podcasts. So yeah, man, I'd like you to kind of talk about how you got into podcasting. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
And then, what are you up to now? Everything you do. So
yeah, there's some exciting stuff actually around the corner right now. But I'll start from the beginning. So, I went to UCLA, and I had always been very like I don't know, I guess creatively oriented. So I started making videos when I was like 12, and then just kept kept with that love. But when I started at UCLA, I went into mechanical engineering because my parents are like, you must do engineering or you are disowned. Almost not quite that level, but almost that intense. And so I went into engineering and just realized it was super boring. Like I was taking a lot of classes that I just wasn't passionate about. I was making robots every once in a while, and I liked that, but that wasn't the majority of what they did at UCLA. And so I started getting into freelance video. And it started when I was applying to study abroad in Australia, and there was a scholarship, and I was like, oh, that scholarship looks kind of interesting. And so I applied for the scholarship. And the scholarship was a media scholarship. So I had to make some videos for it. And so I remember when I made videos when I was 12, let's see how it goes again. And so I started making these videos, ended up getting the scholarship, and then kept making the videos in Australia, realizing, oh, I actually really like this. I can, maybe there's something to this. Like I was getting a couple thousand subscribers on YouTube from some of the videos. I raised a duck to adulthood in Australia and made a video about that, and that did well. And I really just enjoyed the process of telling those stories. And so when I came back, I'm like, okay, I'm doing this engineering stuff. It's fine, but let's see if I can divert some of my my time towards creating content. And so I started just making videos with local businesses around my area in the Valley. And then I compiled these together. There was I did work with this local chamber of commerce, and it actually improved business in the area. And it went somewhat viral on Facebook. And so I was given an award by the city of Los Angeles for improving local businesses. And at that award ceremony, there was a person that came up to me and was like, hey, we're doing this $700 million patient wing for this hospital. Can you help us make videos for that? I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And so I started doing interviews with a lot of the people in that hospital, and created videos for them. And then Netflix saw that and hey, can you do some work for us? And so I did some work with the post-production department at Netflix. And that project got somewhat far, but it ended up falling through. and I had been making videos on YouTube, and I felt that the medium of video, at least how I was interacting with it, felt a little vapid. Like I felt that I was there for self-aggrandizement rather than really telling stories, which is what I was trying to do initially. And so I was looking for another medium that was less me focused. Like I wanted to push the story towards someone else and just be the medium for which that story was expressed. And so I stumbled upon podcasting, right? And so I'm like, all right, I have no idea how to do a podcast, but I have listened to podcasts and I enjoyed it. And funny story that relates to the whole podcasting. So as I'm figuring out this video stuff, I'm listening to this podcast, and this was like maybe like a year before I decided to start my own. I'm listening to this podcast, Startup. And the second season is about this guy, Dov Charney, who is the founder of American Apparel. And he is like at least in the first half of the season, he's like this bombastic guy. He's creating this company from the ground up. And he and they don't really delve into all the bad things about him before, but I'm like, oh, like this guy's super cool. And there was a part in the episode that was almost like a throwaway line. It's like, he's always answering his phone. He's always on the phone. And I'm like, there's no way that he's always answering his phone. And so I found his number online, called him up, and he answered. And so I started talking to him, and I was like a sophomore in college. I'm like, oh, can I have an internship? And he said like, yeah. And so I ended up striking up a relationship with him, like a nice friendship over the couple of years. And so I had this in the back of my mind when I decided to start my own podcast. And initially I'm just interviewing my roommates who are also doing entrepreneurial stuff. And I interview my roommate, Tim, who has this cap and gown business where he sells caps and gowns to the like California area. Put that out. And then my next interview was Dov Charney, founder of American Apparel. And so I hit him up and like, hey, can we do an interview with you? And he said, yeah. And so I went down to his factory, we did an episode, and then things kind of snowballed from there. So now we have we just did an interview with the founder of Masterclass. We have an interview with the founder of Ease, of Soylent. We have 20 people on the team with another 10 to 20 being added very, very soon. We have some IP going to TV. So it's just kind of exploded from there, which has been super exciting.
Do you say you interned at American Apparel?
So what happened is I was offered an internship. It wasn't American Apparel. So it was, he got ousted from his company, American Apparel, for some alleged sexual misconduct. And I did not know that because was only halfway through the season. So it was all just, oh, this guy's great. And so I reached out to him, was very enamored. And then I tell my parents, I'm like, Dov Charney's going to give me an internship. And then they looked into him. And there's and I, I'm still living with my parents, at least during the summer at that point, because I was in the dorms. And they're like, there's no way that you're working for this guy. And so our relationship was just, strictly a friendship. I didn't work for him at that time, but we still stayed in contact.
But that's one of the biggest things with podcasts, because there was actually a study done by Harvard seeing what was the biggest factor for happiness over a long period of time. And the relationships was the biggest factor that people had to having a happier life. The relationships they had, and podcasts is an easy way to get those awesome relationships that would be otherwise
it just makes everyone accessible.
Yes.
I think something that I've been focusing on is just really diving into communities. And initially finding founders was, okay, how can I just talk to the most interesting entrepreneurs to get inspired? And that's awesome, because now the podcast allows you to create those relationships with those great people. But now, I'm going to Puerto Rico in a week and doing interviews with entrepreneurs that came out of Hurricane Maria. And so now I'm delving into communities and saying, how do community leaders shape these communities, and how can I integrate myself into those communities so that I can tell that story more effectively?
Yeah. You were mentioning before, how you started with video and then you got into podcasts, audio. What's the difference in storytelling for you, between audio and video? Yeah. You said I forget the word you said.
Vapid?
and then there was another big word, I don't know, grandize, or I don't know.
Oh, self-aggrandizing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like something that, so I think one of my flaws, especially when I was in college and still to a certain extent now, but I like to think that I have it a little bit more under control, is I had a tendency to be a little narcissistic. And I think video, if you're not careful, can be incredibly enabling for narcissistic personalities. And I was noticing that the content that I was creating wasn't like, it wasn't about the stories. It was about me. Like
The
how can I make
appearance of things.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you see all these travel vloggers or these Instagram posts, it's like, look at me and where I am. And I'm like, I don't want, like that doesn't add anything to the world. Like why?
They
why
think about
even?
the perception of the thing rather than the thing, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's just like it's superficially like just putting yourself in a situation to show that you were there, rather than like where I think podcasting is like you are there just to tell the story. Like that is you have a very distinct purpose that is beyond just trying to
the focus is definitely with video. There's a lot more, like video is more for entertainment, and sometimes there's story in that, I guess. With movies, that's a good example.
Well, there is, and it's not to say that you can't make great content that tell stories with video. Like you definitely can. I just found myself struggling with initially, and especially, you know, when you're a young content creator, like that's I think where things can trend. But what I noticed with podcasting, and especially with what we do narrative podcasts, like we put a lot of editing work and sound design and music behind it. What I noticed with that is I wasn't focused on the visuals. I wasn't focused on myself. I wasn't focused on really like anything but the story. Like when you're listening to the audio, it's just that. Like there's nothing else but like a storyteller, and it kind of it harks back to you know, the great orators of even like, you know, prehistoric times, where they were passing stories around generation after generation around a fireplace, and like it was just that story and just the communication of like a greater idea than the self, greater idea than even that individual community. It was like the human story. And so I found myself like being able to channel that in a way, at least a lot easier through podcasting.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with the medium.
Can you talk about, you mentioned narration podcasts or narrative podcasts, like I guess what you see the difference being there? Obviously there's like there's more elements of it. Like I guess the music you incorporate, and I guess the formats, you could be more creative. So it's more like an experience.
Essentially, what it allows us to do is just immerse people in the story more. Like like, for example, in the beginning of this
I guess it just gets your imagination going more.
Yeah, it gets your imagination going, and there's not interruptions. Like, for example, the beginning of this interview, like I was like getting warmed up, and like I'm getting used to just talking. And so there's a lot of what I said in the beginning that like could be condensed down to a minute instead of maybe the 6 minutes it took me to tell that story. And so there's this, I think what we create is we create densely packed narratives, because we do a 2-hour interview and we condense that down to 45 minutes. So like people are listening to the most essential parts of that story. And I think because you're only listening to the essential parts, all the noise is taken away, and you're allowed to focus on who is this person? What are they trying to tell me? And what can I take out of that experience and that story? And so I think that's what a narrative podcast does. Is it strips the noise and leaves only the story.
And I could tell there's definitely in post, you guys like you re-record the questions, it seems like, or I guess how you introduce that question. And
so we were, so like there's the interview that we record, which is 2 hours, and then we record voiceover after. So like there's all this analysis work that we do when we split it up into these thematic chapters almost. And then we listen and analyze what is this person trying to say and how does it fit into their greater narrative or greater purpose. And then we analyze that in the voiceover. And so we write that out, and then that's probably what you're hearing after is the voiceover is recorded, weeks after the initial podcast.
What would you say is a theme of your content? Because I was actually posting about this a few days ago about how, it's important to have themes with your content, like something like to every story you tell, like why does that matter? And like, what's the thing you're trying to emphasize within every story that's kind of correlative, like a movie has a theme where there's like an end goal or something. There's like a point to everything, right?
Yeah.
So like, I guess in your experience, like how do you feel about that, I guess?
Yeah, no, definitely. So it's become closer to what I initially set out to do. And that theme is vulnerability. I think why I chose entrepreneurs as the initial subject was because they're the modern day gladiators. They're the people that are doing the things that many wish they could do and don't have the courage to. They're putting themselves in these sometimes precarious and risky situations by leaving a 9-to-5, leaving stability and trying to strike out on their own and trying to create something that maybe hasn't been done before, at least not in that way. And there's this courage that's associated with that. And also this vulnerability, right? To put yourself out into the world and say, hey, this is something that I've created. Like, what do you think of it? Like, can you accept it? That's a tough thing to do. And you have to be vulnerable to do it.
Yeah, because rejection is important.
Yeah, also. Rejection is scary. And so I looked at these people that kind of seem invincible. At least that's what they have to portray to get past that point where no one believes in them and they don't even believe in themselves. Right? There's this portrayal of like imperviousness. But they're not impervious. They doubt themselves just like everyone else. And so when I tell these stories, I try to pierce that like strong facade as quickly as I can, and get to the vulnerability of it. Like one of my favorite questions is, when did you feel closest to failure? Because like for example, when I talked to the founder of Masterclass, he thought he was going to fail right after release. Like if you listen to the episode, he was about to fail. They release Masterclass, like the first couple courses, and he's thinking there's going to be a fanfare, there's going to be all these things, there's going to be a flood of subscriptions and people buying, and there wasn't that. And he's like, I just put in 6 years of my life, hundreds of millions of other people's dollars, and it's going to flop, right? And so he went home and he cried and he talked to his parents and he talked to his family and his loved ones and said, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what's going to happen, right? And so there's this moment of vulnerability with the people that is closest to him. But then he goes into the office and he puts on the brave face, the face that most people would associate with entrepreneurship and with like these big businesses. It's like, hey, we're going to do this, right? And so he puts on that brave face, but just, below the surface, there's someone who's like crushed. And then his marketing guy comes up to him. It's like, you're not going to believe like the KPIs we have on this. Like, this is going to be a huge business, right? And so like the very next day, they knew they're going to be successful. But there's these moments of vulnerability where it humanizes them, and it shows, hey, like we've all experienced that low point. And we've all experienced that struggle. So people that are in that spot where they are at their lowest can jump on and rise with the success of that entrepreneur. And so I think what we're doing is we're distilling vulnerability for true inspiration, because inspiration doesn't come from success after success and just like stacking your accomplishments on top of each other. It comes from, hey, this is where I really struggled, but look like how I pivoted and use this to propel myself towards these high heights. Yeah. And so just to sum up, like I'm trying to showcase vulnerability and use that as a way to show those low points to motivate and inspire that next generation of entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Which is why people listen to podcasts. No one's going to be like, I'm going to listen to 30 minutes and I don't know why I'm listening to this. It's because they want something out of it, really.
Yeah. And I think there's this intimacy with podcasts, like hearing two voices in a room, like just talk to each other. You feel close to it in a way that maybe like if you close your eyes, it's like they're there. And maybe with the medium of film, there's a little bit more work that needs to be put in to engross someone at that intimate level.
So following, I guess that intention you have with a podcast, like what are your favorite questions to ask?
Yeah. So one of them I mentioned before was the when were you at your lowest point? Another one I think that I find like fascinating is just what were you doing when you were at a kid that you really like what were you doing when you were a kid that like you really loved? Like what did you do that you really loved as you were a child? And I find it fascinating focusing because like a good portion of our episode is focusing on early life. And I find that fascinating because there's so many themes and interests that come up in childhood that people don't recognize guided their entire life. A lot of feedback that I get after like I show these people the episode is like, I didn't even know that about myself. Like it makes sense. Like my story has never been contextualized in this way. Like usually people call me up. It's like I cried listening, and I view my life
because most people bury their past.
Yeah, they bury their past, or at least don't take the time to think about it.
Or we're just too busy about like what's coming, what we want to create, etc. Especially entrepreneurs, they're always thinking about.
You're always thinking about the next step, but reflection is really important because it makes you more sure that next step is going to be the right one. And I think that's why reflection is just so important. Like journaling is awesome. Highly recommend.
What's your favorite way to like format podcasts as far as like from a storytelling perspective? So you start like, you know, from their past, probably childhood. Yeah. Like what else do you kind of like pockets you like to go into?
I like to stay intensely chronological. So we have a whole research team that just gets everything, scrapes the internet for everything about this person, and we put it by year. And so I look at that when I'm interviewing them, and like sometimes it's easy to maintain chronology, sometimes it's harder. Like some of the founders have like a little bit more ADD like demeanors, and so they're racing all over. They're like, okay, I was here in childhood, but like let's go all the way to when I'm 42, and this relates back to when I was 13, and we're in like 40 different places at once. And so it's really hard to maintain like this through line, like this story that makes sense. And so with those people, I have to like rein them back. It's like, oh, we'll get to that in a sec. But where were you when you were 14, right? So I like to stay as chronologically as possible. And I think that just makes editing a whole lot easier. And just the story come out in a more elegant way.
What was your favorite interview that you've done so far?
So the masterclass one was great, but I did an interview with a founder of Soylent. And after the interview finished, I asked him like, who's the most interesting person you know? Cause like the founder of Soylent, it's like a couple $100 million company. It's like a big brand within the like biohacking kind of community, like the coding. Like I'm not gonna. Do you know what Soylent is?
Yeah, it's like food in a bottle or something.
It's basically liquid food. And so it has this cult following, and it's gained some mass appeal recently. But he's very tied into the biohacking space, and so he recommended me this guy, Mac Davis, who has created a company that is pursuing immortality. So he is trying to live forever. There's this thing called mini circle that I never really delved into biology.
There's a scientist, I think Ray Kurzweil, who's also into that, I think.
Ray Kurzweil, Singularity. He wrote The Singularity is Near, right?
I believe so, but he's into immortality as well.
I actually have his book. in my closet. It's dense as heck.
Yeah, all futurists want to live forever, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. I was talking to Dave Asprey, who founded Bulletproof Coffee, the other day, and he believes adamantly that he will live to 180 years old. And so, but he probably knows stuff that I don't. But
yeah, but I mean, confidence is a skill a lot of these entrepreneurs have too.
That's true. That's very true.
But did he say why?
Why? Just like, I guess, just generally technology advancing. There's a lot of life extending tech out there. He didn't give me a single reason, but when I'm going to interview him in a couple weeks for the full interview, so I'll ask him then. But the favorite interview was
3D
Matt
printed
Davis.
body parts.
Sorry, say again?
So you just gonna have 3D printed body parts? And
Yeah. All robot bodies. Like, we're gonna just have that floating head. We're gonna have a Neuralink chip planted in the brain, and then we'll just be Boston Robotics. We'll just be in one of those spot dogs.
Which I saw the video on Neuralink, like the demo.
Oh, dude, insane.
Yeah, but it's more like just a communication device, not necessarily like gonna be. It's going to be, I think it can be used for a lot of different applications. Like people can connect to it.
But when you think about it, like, all right, so it's a communication device initially, right? But if you can send brain signals to a computer, why couldn't you send it to like let's say you're a paraplegic. Let's put another one of these things in your lower spine, one in the brain. Now it's connecting past the point that is severed. Or let's say you want to you want to up that, and like, let's just cut the legs off and put some robot legs on, and now you can send signals to there. So it's like it can, I think, very quickly advance to the point where we're connecting robots.
What's interesting, because it is so invasive, I bet, like right now they're probably learning way more than we don't know a lot about the brain. We're like still trying to figure out how to map it. So I think they're like learning how to optimize the mapping of it, which can be applied to so much other things, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, going back to Ray Kurzweil, like, he's very optimistic about how artificial intelligence will help us. But like, one of the ways that he thinks we'll get to a singularity is through brain mapping and like brain machine interfaces. So like there's a couple different ways. Like there's like nanobots, and then they're like self-replicating nanobots, and then there's like true AI, whereas like the computer becomes sentient, and then there's artificial intelligence that is piggybacked off the brain's natural
imagine robots knowing how to make robots. That's when we lose.
Dude, I forgot what the there's this awesome game that is a thought experiment on that, because there's a name for those robots, a self-replicating robot. It's like some kind of self-replicating. I'm gonna look it up really quick, because like there's like a rocket ship that it's not like a Dyson. That's not a Dyson Sphere. That's something else. Name, but I forgot what Hungarian. Oh, von Neumann machines. Yes. Von Neumann machines. It was this Hungarian mathematician, and he like a while ago created this idea of the von Neumann machines, which are self-replicating robots that are also rocket ships that will travel to other planets, harvest those natural resources, and then create more self-replicating robots, and then harvest those natural resources and just replicate until it conquers the whole universe.
Sounds like a virus.
It's exactly what it is.
Because how do you stop it? Unless you have the big red button. But
yeah. So hopefully Elon programs one of those.
Everything like from macro and micro scale is always like in the universe always matches. But
the fractal patterns.
So yeah, what's how do you feel like the podcast industry? Like, what are you excited about? Like, what do you see being new and being a focus for you?
So I see things going towards the Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus model. So like there's going to be
China, like in China, I guess.
Huh?
China does that, where everything's paid, all the podcast.
Yeah, I don't know much about that actually.
They make billions a year. I think their market is like $25 billion a year from podcasts.
That's insane.
It's like almost every podcast you have to pay to listen to.
Jesus. Is it because they have networks? Like podcast networks that are
I
like,
think it's more like the feeds, like the apps. Like it's just normal. If you want to listen to it, you could probably preview it, but then you have to buy to have almost like a Twitch streamer, right? You would subscribe to get access to like certain features. So
that's super interesting.
but it's normal. So from a marketing perspective, there's not friction. But here, if you try to make a podcast paid, there's friction, right?
All right. Well, I guess we better start learning Mandarin.
That's a hard one.
我会说一点普通话。
You know Mandarin?
I taught English in China for a little bit, so I know like a tiny bit, enough to order like beer. But I lost it all like a year ago. So
yeah, but so you're thinking that's going to be I know Luminary is an app that I don't know if they're doing successful.
I don't know. I see Wondery as coming out as one of those. But I just see like people bundling together. Like for example, Spotify is taking Joe Rogan exclusive. I think there's going to be a lot more deals like that.
Yeah. So Pandora actually, or no, Sirius bought Pandora, and they also bought Simplecast, which is a big hosting platform, which I use. So I guess they're trying to get like from front to end, like consumer interaction.
Yeah, completely vertically integrated.
Because right now they're trying to add their own like mid-roll ad platform, just like a database to Simplecast that Sirius owns. I forget what I think it's I forget what it's called, the company that does that.
Do you have like an RSS feed for all podcast news? How do you keep up to date on everything that you know?
Pod News is one that I
Pod News.
Pod News is they do a daily like news, and then also I have like a Google alert every day for like top things for podcast keywords every day.
Google. I'm gonna have to, because you are like super knowledgeable about all this stuff.
Yeah, Pod News. That's I just read that. So every morning it's a good email.
I'll pick that
I should
up.
probably get the guy on the show. He has a podcast, I think, James.
Yeah, dude, definitely reach out. Make those connections. Make the world a bit smaller. So
anything else you're excited about, I guess, in the podcasting space? Anything you're up to? Anything you're building?
Yeah, I mean, so we're building out the team right now. So and then also the production studio in addition to the podcast, which has been super fun. But I think I like going back to that Puerto Rico stuff. Like I'm really excited to delve more into communities. So like, the reason that I'm focusing on Puerto Rico... Is that
still going to be audio?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So like the reason I'm going to Puerto Rico is to see, and like, I guess, repeat what I said a little bit earlier, is to see how destruction sows the seeds of opportunity and growth. And then to contextualize the experience that Puerto Rico went through in Hurricane Maria and contextualize it with like Corona, like what we're experiencing now. And so I'm really excited to test out that trip, because that's the first real like series that I've made with Finding Founders that will explore community. And so I'm excited to see how I can do this at a grander scale. So this is that first test to see like, okay, what does this teach me and where can I go from here? And so I'm really just excited to delve into more of those communities and tell stories of people that maybe don't have as much of a voice or a platform as like the usual people that we interview, like the masterclasses, the Eases, the Soylents, the American Apparels. So that's what I'm really excited to delve more towards. Nice.
When do you plan to do that?
I'm going on the 25th.
The 25th, is there like no restrictions with flying to there?
Well, because like Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, so technically it's like part of the U.S. Okay. And you just have to get COVID tested before. So, I mean, I get COVID tested every like month or so. So I have been coming back negative. But you have to get tested 72 hours before you leave. So I'll be doing that very soon again.
Gotcha. Cool. I still haven't got tested yet. I saw some videos of like people crying. I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Oh, it goes way up your nose. It goes.
You've done it already?
Like like how like in Egypt they had those people that like they would like make your brain into soup and it would come out of your nose so you could be buried. You know about that?
No.
So like in Egypt, when they would bury people in the pyramids, they would stick this tool up your nose and mush your brain around, and then it would all just come out. And I don't know why they did that, but That's what it feels like, because they're just sticking it all up in there. Yeah. Not the most comfortable experience.
Oh God. I don't know. I'm gonna YouTube that, see if I can see a video. No. But cool, man. Well, I appreciate you kind of sharing everything. If people want to go listen to your podcast, follow you, you shout yourself out.
Yeah. So you can listen to Finding Founders wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, everything. You can visit our website at findingfounders.co, or you can see us on Instagram at Finding Founders Podcast, or you can look me up on Instagram, and it's just Samuel Donner.
Boom. Well, dude, I appreciate you being on. Dropped a lot of nuggets, and I'm sure a lot of people, if they listen to your podcast, they'll notice immediately like it's different than most, which is good. So yeah, man, thanks so much.
Of course.
See you guys later. Peace out.
Later.